Thank you, everybody. That is a fantastic voice of God. I've never heard one like that before. That is great. It is fantastic to see so many marketers here in this room. I think James is telling me there's about 800 people here, so we're sort of running at capacity. This is really, really good and excellent to see. So, as the voice of God pointed out, my name is Charles, and I work for the Economist Intelligence Unit. And before you start guessing about my weird and potentially wonderful accent, I grew up in Melbourne, so born and bred in Melbourne. Don't hold that against me. Then spent about 10 years in London before moving to Singapore. So I live in Singapore now, and I've been there for 2 years. And what I do at the EIU is I focus on technology-related research projects. So I look at the implications for business of a whole raft of new technologies which are coming on board. These are things like cloud computing, like data analytics, like the Internet of Things. So looking at the implications for those for business. How are businesses reimagining themselves, restructuring themselves, thinking about how they operate to take the most value out of these new technologies? And so I've done some interesting research recently looking at this through the lens of a few different functions. So earlier this year, I did some research on data analytics and looking at the role of the CFO in data analytics. And the sort of premise of that research was thinking about, so CFOs are good at working with data. They have a fairly central role within the organization because of their financial control. So maybe they're the best people to be managing data analytics and to be looking after data analytics. So that was interesting to look at that from a CFO point of view, and I may disagree with that later in my presentation. And so another one I did was looking at the customer experience, and we're going to talk about more about that in the research shortly. But customer experience, and looking at the idea that because the customer experience spreads right across the whole organization, across lots of different functions, across lots of different touch points, it's got to be the CEO who needs to take charge of the customer experience, because they're the only person that has that breadth of view over the organization to sort of break down silos within a company that might exist, to sort of make that consistent customer experience. They're the only person that has that power to be able to do that. And you think of sort of the obvious example is sort of Steve Jobs, who was one person that took charge of the customer experience and was able to make Apple's delivery of all of their products and services and their interaction with the customer consistent across the whole organization because he was the CEO and he had the power. Now, today, we're talking about this a little bit differently. We're talking about the marketing function. We're talking about marketers. We're talking about you guys. And what we wanted to find out is that, actually, maybe it's not the CFO who should be taking care of analytics. Maybe it's not the CEO that should be taking care of the customer experience because they're very busy and they've got a lot of other stuff to do. Maybe it should be marketers. Maybe they're in a better position to be looking after this whole customer experience because they have the knowledge of the customer, they have the knowledge of the products, and they may not quite have the skills yet. You guys may not quite have the skill yet for the data analytics side of it, but that's something you can retool. So that's sort of the premise for this research, to look at how this is going to work and the role of the marketer in the future. So I want to start with this quote here. This is potentially the first interaction you may all have with a company, the direct contact with a company. You might call them up on the phone, and this is the very first message you have. Your call is very important to us. Please hold. Now, I'm sure if you hear this, you've got pretty low expectations about what is to come. This doesn't really bode very well, and this is the first interaction you're having. And this is a real missed marketing opportunity for a company. And these marketing opportunities happen all through an organization. There are many, many touch points now, and technology has created all of these touch points which a customer has with a company. And this is one of them, and this is where a company has missed out on that opportunity. And probably don't need to tell you this, but it's important that you don't miss out on these opportunities because these opportunities are important. This data here is from McKinsey & Co., and it says that 3/4 of consumers say they will stop doing business with a company after a bad experience. It's a very large opportunity missed out and very damaging for an organization. And what is worse, and I don't need to tell you this, I'm sure, is that they don't just stop doing business with you. They tell their friends, they tell their family, they tell their social networking communities, they tell everybody. They're able to amplify that massively. Now, if we look at these 800 fantastic marketers here in the room, if I had something bad to say, potentially about the trip I just took from Singapore to Sydney, about the quality of my flight, if I had something bad to say about Singapore Airlines, it's be a great chance to do this because I could tell you guys, you could tell your friends, you could tell your communities. We could get massive scale on this. Maybe I would get an upgrade on the way back. I could try it. I could exploit my position, but unfortunately, my flight here was pretty average, uneventful. Nothing really happened. So maybe I should have made something up, but that wouldn't be ethical. I won't do that. Anyway, so really powerful, the way customers can amplify that missed marketing opportunity. Really important that companies do not miss out on that opportunity. So, talk about technology, creating all of these new interactions between the customer and the company. So what is really happening here? And so this technology is making all of these different functions with an organization collide. Because the customer can now interact directly with the finance department, with operations, with marketing, with sales, all the way through an organization. So they're all sort of colliding together, and there isn't real, a real break, a real definition between what each of the functions are doing and how they should be communicating with their customers. It's all being sort of meshed up, which goes back to some of the research I was doing before that, why would the CEO be in charge of the customer experience? Why would the CFO be in charge of big data and data analytics? It doesn't really sort of gel with the traditional functions, traditional roles that they might have. So everything is sort of being mashed up. And so what I mentioned before and what I want to talk about today is this idea that maybe it's the marketers, you guys, that need to hold all of this together, that you are in the position to be able to hold all of this together. As I said before, you have the knowledge of the customer already, you have the knowledge of the company, the products and services, the R&D. We're in that sort of central position because you need to understand about all of this. And you also have the opportunity to sort of increase your data analytics skills to make the most of all of this information which is coming up. So that's what we're looking at today. We're looking at whether the marketers, whether you guys should be taking control of this. And to some extent, actually, you already are. So this figure here is, when I came up with this figure, is quite astounding, really. So marketing expenditures now total $1 trillion globally. That is a very, very large number. And a large portion of that $1 trillion is focused on technology spend, that you guys are spending on tech. And it's interesting to see and interesting to hear about marketing people spending a lot of money on tech. But it's not really that surprising because you are investing in your own technology above and beyond and away from the IT department. I did some research earlier this year, and I was talking to it's a company called Click, who do business intelligence software. This is not a shameless plug for them. I have nothing to do with them. But so they were telling me that often they will sell technology, and they will sell to various different parts within an organization. And those parts of the organization will not know that Click are talking to them. So they will sell their software to the finance function, they will sell it to the marketing function, they'll sell it to the sales function, they'll sell it to operations, and they'll be selling these individual pieces of technology, their business intelligence software, to many different parts of the organization. And marketing are doing a lot of that. You guys are spending a lot of money on technology. And CEOs are happy for you to do this because they recognize the value that marketing can bring. They're happy for you to spend $1 trillion globally, marketing expenditures, very large numbers still. They're happy for you to do this because they realize the value that you can bring in. But they are starting to ask, or they have been asking in the past, but they are starting to ask really loudly now, so where is the return on this? We need to see some concrete return on our investment here. And this is one of the key things which came up in our research, that the CEO wanting to spend more money on you, but wanting you to be a little bit more accountable about where you are spending your money. But they do recognize, and this is a great position for you, that when marketing works, it really, really works. It can fly, it can really drive a company. And there's another stat from McKinsey & Co. here, which says that revenue growth at companies with advanced marketing and sales capabilities are 30% greater than average. So if you're investing in these advanced capabilities, you're really going to grow above and beyond average. And so these stats really help you because they recognize with the CEO, with the other parts of the organization, that what you're doing has a huge amount of value to the organization. So they're backing you and willing to put more money into marketing, to invest in technology and other types of marketing. So they also recognize that marketing is a really key foundation for growth. Here's another quote from McKinsey. Phil talked earlier about quoting credible research, so I'm quoting McKinsey here a lot. Maybe I'll quote The Economist at some point. We have some credible stuff too, but maybe that will come later. So McKinsey say that investing to build a carefully chosen group of marketing and sales capabilities can yield as much as 5 or 10 times that of an investment in hard assets such as factory equipment. So you get a lot more return on your investment with marketing above and beyond the sort of traditional investing in capital equipment, factory equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So real value. So a lot of the research out there is pointing to the fact that invest in marketing when you get it right, real value, real growth. And that's really fantastic to see. So let me step back a little bit. And so we all know, or you probably all know, I'm sure you all know, about the marketing funnel and how that traditional idea that marketing would sit at the top of this funnel and you'd be looking after brand and advertising, you'd sort of capture the customers and then they'd flow into the funnel and then go through to sales and then they would talk about the products and services and try and close the deal as we move down through the funnel. Now, the technology that I've been talking about has blown this funnel apart. That funnel is not really working for us anymore because, as Phil mentioned in his presentation earlier, the interactions a customer can have with a company are all scattered throughout the business. They can do a lot of the research in their own time. They can think about your products and services. They can price match. They can do everything before actually feeding through into that funnel of marketing, sales, etc. So that has really been blown apart. And what it's really done, and Phil mentioned this earlier is for the little bit of his presentation that I saw, means that the customer is now at the center of the organization. They're the ones who are really in charge here. This really is a consumer-led economy. They have the power to make purchasing decisions on their own time, in their own way, using mobile devices. They can research, they can talk to their friends, they can get product reviews, etc., etc. They can do really all of this on their own terms. So really a customer-led economy. And I'm sure you all know this anyway, but it's only going to get worse. Or worse, better, but it's only going to lean in that way towards a customer-led economy. But customers do not have it all their own way, because what comes with this customer-led economy and with their use of mobile devices and their and the amount of data which is being generated about the way they use products and services and where they use it, how they're consuming it, all of this information can be captured by you guys and can be captured by marketers and can be analyzed to create insightful, actionable insights and really drive strategy. So you can flip the tables back slightly in the direction of the company and in the direction of marketers. And that is all driven by data and information. And so if marketers have this central role in an organization, if you cut across all of these functions and you have the skills and the expertise to be able to get actionable insights out of all of this data, that's where the real value is going to be. And that's where it's going to be really exciting going forward. It's only going to increase when you've got things like Internet of Things coming online. If you don't know, the Internet of Things is this concept that in the future, all products will have an inbuilt sensor and they'll be able to communicate. They'll have it at their own IP address and they'll be able to tell you information about where they're being, how they're being used, where they're being used, how these things are being consumed. And it'll give you a lot of really vital information about your products and about how your customers are obviously, and if you add that into all of the data analytics, how your customers are using that as well. So you have the opportunity to sort of switch the tables back in the favor of the customer, of the company, if you're able to really take advantage of all of this extra information which is being generated out there and which will be exponentially grow into the future. But the problem we have at the moment is that it's difficult to create actionable insights out of all of this information. And many companies don't really know the best way of restructuring their organization to do this. Because it's quite difficult. I mean, this is like all new technologies. What is the best way to leverage this? And this harks back to sort of, I mentioned the range of research I've been doing to try and help companies think about sort of, which functions are meant to look after this. Who's meant to be doing this? Whose role and responsibility is this? How can we best get value out of this? Because it's not straightforward. So this research we did today was to try and understand that, it did in the last number of months, was to try and understand better what companies should do, what they can do to get better at utilizing this information and leveraging this technology. So we did some research. First, we spoke to a bunch of visionaries. Their names are on the screen here, if you can see them up here. Really, marketing visionaries. I know at least some of these guys, or some of these people are speaking to you today. I know Gavin Heaton is on, maybe after this or a little bit later today. So we spoke to a bunch of visionaries to find out about their views on the role of marketers into the future. We did a big survey. The Economist is really good at doing surveys about talking to senior level people within an organization. So we did a big global survey of 478 senior marketers. So CMOs, senior marketers, heads of marketing, senior marketers. And we topped that up with a big survey from Australia and New Zealand so that we can get the Australia and New Zealand perspective here. There was 92 from Australia and New Zealand, including 62 from Australia and 30 from New Zealand. So first, I'm going to talk about the global results so you can see that. And then we'll talk about the Australia and New Zealand results. And there are some differences. There are some bit of surprising differences in there as well, but you'll see those shortly. So we're going to start with the global results. So first, you guys told us, and part of the global team, is that an 80% of you said that you're saying that you need to restructure the marketing function. It needs to change. So you're recognizing that the landscape has changed, that the funnel has been blown apart, and we need to change things. And so 80%, most people recognize that things do need to change. The status quo is not going to work anymore. So this is a good thing. 29% of you say that this change is urgent. So it really needs to happen quickly. A lot of our research works in that sort of 3 to 5 year time frame. What's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years? And so you're saying probably this change needs to happen before that. That's too long. 3 to 5 years is too long. We need to start moving on this now. So the change is urgent. And so what does that change look like? What are you telling me that change looks like? And this image on the screen, I'm not for 1 second suggesting that this is the average marketer on the left-hand side of the screen here. Absolutely not. This is purely a reflection of how dramatic that change might need to be. So what are the changes? There are 5 of them. This is the first one. The first is that marketing needs to change from a cost center to a revenue source. So it's not just about being a cost center, it's about driving revenue as well. 80% of companies we surveyed will classify marketing as a revenue driver in 3 to 5 years. That's a pretty dramatic shift. This is a pretty big number. That's at 80%. 4/5 of companies are saying you need to be a revenue driver. That's pretty different. I don't know how many of you can sit there sort of 5, 10 years ago thinking that marketing, their primary role would be as a revenue driver. That's a pretty big change. So that's what people are telling us globally, need to be a revenue driver. They're also telling us that, like I said in the introduction, that perhaps it should be the CMO or the marketing function which should be leading the customer experience. That you guys, because of your skills, because of your knowledge, should be the ones who are leading the customer experience. It shouldn't be the CEO. They've got too much else to worry about. It should be the marketing function. And 3/4 of you said that you'll be responsible for the customer experience in the next 3 to 5 years. So That's where your role will be. It's the center of that marketing function. You may need to fight with other parts of the organization to get control of that, but there you are. You should be taking control of the customer experience. But that will be difficult. The reason why we do some research about why the CEO should be taking control of the customer experience is because it is difficult, because there are a lot of internal obstacles you need to overcome. And far and away, I've done quite a lot of research on this, and far and away the biggest obstacle to getting value from data analytics, which is the information which is going to drive your knowledge of the customer and improve that customer experience across the whole customer lifetime. The biggest obstacle are silos within an organization. These can be organizational silos, they can be information silos, because you have a whole picture of the customer in the finance department, from an accounting point of view, from a sales point of view, from a marketing point of view, from an operational point of view. You might have information within the R&D department. All of these obstacles within a company are really difficult to break down. So it's a really big challenge. And that's one you will need to overcome if you are to really create an overall picture of the customer and have that central customer experience control. So, overcoming obstacles. I never said this would be easy, but I'm sure you'll be able to manage the overcoming the obstacles. The third one we talk about is there will be a shift in customer engagement. The customer engagement traditionally was about the brand. And then we talk about the 22% here on the screen first. So this 22% are still relating customer engagement directly to the brand. It is interesting to note, and I've got a little red asterisk on that one as well, interesting to note that 22% are also the people who think that marketing is less likely to change in the future. So we can call them traditionalists, if you like. They think the normal status quo of marketing will continue. It will be business as usual, and we'll continue focusing on engagement to build the brand, linked to the brand. That's the 22%. That's a minority, but the majority have changed their tune. They're now thinking that the 78% that engagement will relate directly to sales, that it is all about sales. And this links to the early comments about marketing as a revenue generator, driving sales. It is all about sales, that marketing engagement is going to be about sales into the future. So it's a pretty big change as well. We're moving from the traditional into what we think is going to happen in the future. And the reason why engagement, this idea around engagement is changing, is that engagement really is the key to loyalty. And in our research, 63% of marketers say that engagement is best shown in renewals, retention, and repeat purchases. And this is driving sales. This is driving revenue. So you drive engagement, you're driving the loyalty. It's not about just the brand anymore. The brand is important. Clearly, the brand is important. I must know that the brand is important. I work for The Economist, and our greatest asset is our brand. That's why we get to charge a lot of money for our newspapers, magazines, charge a lot of money for our research, because we have the brand. Clearly, there's quality as well. Hope you agree there is quality in our research. But it is, a brand is clearly important. But there has been a shift, that it's not just about the brand anymore. There's more to that. The marketing role has expanded into engagement as well, building loyalty, driving sales. So fourth, some of this stuff is hard. I talked about silos before. To break those down, that is difficult. We talked a lot about data analytics and all of this new information that you're going to have to process to better understand the customer, to manage the end-to-end customer experience. So you're going to need to retool. A new set of tools and skills will be required. Top 3 skills. First 2 you probably know about already, and you're probably focusing a lot of time on already. Digital engagement, marketing operations, and technology. Third one, strategy and planning. This is a little bit different, and this is around those really actionable insights that you will create from all of this data and all of this information. So this talks about the raising status of the marketer, of you guys. And Phil mentioned earlier that your position with an organization is getting really valued and really important. And in the future, we're talking about you being the most important function within the company. And that's because if you're able to take all of this information about a customer, put it all together and create these actionable insights, you can really help drive long-term strategy and planning for the organization. Because it's about the customer, and it's about understanding how the products and services are used and taste for the future, etc. So really powerful, but you're going to need to retool first. I'm not a big data analysis person. I don't know how many people here in the room are big data analysis people. Maybe we have a show of hands. Who's strong on data? Who would count themselves a data scientist? That's a big term which is put out there a lot. Data scientist. I don't think we need data scientists, actually. Not that you aren't important, of course, but I did some work in Singapore for the Singapore government recently, and they talked about we're facing a massive crisis around data scientists because we don't have enough of them. And if we've got to drive everything with data analytics, whether it's the smart cities, it's our infrastructure, everything is going to be run with data. So we need data scientists to be able to understand this. I don't think that's necessarily true because I think if you can create great user-friendly software, then if you're intelligent and you understand the business and the market, you can make actionable insights out of that anyway. You don't all have to be data scientists, but you do have to have a good understanding of data, and you need to be able to manipulate it through this in software, etc. So this is one skill you need to learn about: strategy and planning, very important for the future. The last thing which came out of the research, again, global research, talking to your global peers, was that 75% of investments will be focused on reaching customers through social, mobile, and email. That probably isn't surprising to you as well, either. That's probably not new. You're probably investing a lot of money in that anyway. What might be a little less surprising is this 25%, which talks to this deep data analysis that you will need to do to better understand your customer and your products and services and how they're being used. You need that 25% investment to be able to knit all of these parts of the business together. So big investment looking to grow there, 25%. I'm sure that will probably grow in the future as well. So that is where you're telling us investment will go into the future. So that was the global view. Now for the bad news, maybe. What's happening in Australia and New Zealand? I was a bit surprised by this. I was talking to James about this when these research findings came out. And we're thinking, is this right? Is this true? Australian New Zealand marketers thinking like this? The sort of go-get-you attitude in Australia, get out there. So let's see if you agree with me. So just to remind you, we spoke to, at a total, 660 respondents, 92 of those in Australia and New Zealand. So this is the data which compares those 92 to the rest of the global numbers. And so what did you tell us? Well, firstly, you told us, or you agreed with the global numbers, that there is a need for change. You do agree there is a need for change, but you're a little less forceful about it. That it's not quite, there should be change, but we're not sort of really jumping on the bandwagon here. I mean, you would talk about the numbers here. Strongly agree from a rest of world number. I think that's 28%. My screen's a bit small here. Maybe my text should be bigger. I hope you can read that. 28%. Strongly agree. 15% strongly agree in ANZ. So you think there should be change, but not quite as positive as the rest of the world about this. I don't know if you would agree with that or not. You should talk amongst yourselves during the day today to see, how much do you think the marketing function needs to change? How positive are you about this? Are you in the mildly agree camp? Are you in the strongly agree camp? Or do you actually disagree? Are you more of a traditionalist, that we're doing a good job and this is the way that it should stay? So you also said, and this was a little bit surprising as well, that the marketing here in Australia and New Zealand seems to be less influential than the rest of the world. So on this chart here, you can see in red, Australia and New Zealand, blue is the rest of the world. And through all of these different areas of the business, you can see that Australia and New Zealand think that they have less influence on that part of the business than your colleagues in the rest of the world. And that's from advertising and branding right through e-commerce and creative graphic art. So you currently, right here, right now, have less of an influence on all these different areas of the business. And these are the areas, actually, where there is the less influence, the biggest gap between the rest of the world and what's happening here in terms of influence. So product management, 35% of marketers in Australia and New Zealand saying that they are driving that, marketing is driving that part of the business, and compared to 58% in the rest of the world. So we've got quite big gaps running here. I've highlighted one here, which is content marketing. That's one which is close to my own heart because a lot of the research I do drives content marketing. And as I said before, I do that out of Singapore. We do some good research in Australia, but not enough of that. So if you guys can get more influence on content marketing, if you like the research, try and drive that content marketing. Let's build a business in Australia. Let's try and do that. My shameless plug. Anyway, I don't hold out too much hope for that, though, because this looks like the future. This is the 3 to 4 year time frame, and we can still see that marketing is not driving content marketing. We've got 32% against 48% in the rest of the world. So I think my hope for you guys helping me to grow the content marketing business for The Economist is not going to play out here. But seriously, what we are saying here is that you guys don't think you're going to have a huge amount of influence on these parts of the business going into the future, now or in the future. And the rest of the world thinks you will have more influence. The rest of the world is saying that marketing is more important. We can create more value across all parts of the business than you guys are telling us here in Australia and New Zealand. I hope that the rest of the world is right and you guys have more influence within the organization across these areas and not less influence like you may be telling us here in Australia and New Zealand. So, marketers here in Australia and New Zealand, these are the skills that you're focusing on. And the skills that you're looking to develop and build are some of those more traditional skills, which talks about engagement in terms of sort of brand building. There's traditional skills around advertising and branding, and that's where marketers in Australia and New Zealand are placing their bets on terms of building their skills. Rest of the world, a little bit different. We've got marketing and ops technology being the number one, data analysis being the number two. So rest of the world are looking forward to this world where the marketers will be at the center of the organization, managing the information, creating actionable insights, driving long-term strategy. And they're tooling up for this. Australia and New Zealand, less positive about that, not planning quite so early for this. So, and you're also seeing marketing as a revenue driver, which is a positive thing. It's great, because this is what the rest of the world is telling us as well is going to happen into the future, that it will be about driving revenue. And Australia and New Zealand largely agrees with that sentiment, that you will be a revenue driver. Not quite as positive as the rest of the world, but still seeing it as a revenue driver. But you are less likely to be driving strategy. And so this is supported by some of the other data points I've just mentioned, that it's sort of business as usual a little bit, that your influence within many parts of the organization are not as strong as other parts of the world, and therefore you're sort of less inclined to be driving strategy and less thinking about sort of raising up into your position within the organization. I think you all, and I don't know how many of you participated in this piece of research, we probably reached out to some of you. I hope it changes. I hope you're going to be more positive about your role in the future, because there's a real opportunity here for marketers to stand up and start driving long-term strategy within a business, place themselves at the center of the business, have more influence. Your marketers around the world are thinking this, are putting actions into place, are building up their skill sets. So I hope this happens here in Australia as well. And so here in Australia and New Zealand, we see marketing as managing the end-to-end customer experience. So you do see you are doing that. And we do, and in both now and in the next 3 to 5 years, you do see that you will be managing that end-to-end customer experience. But a little bit unlike the rest of the world, you're not quite taking advantage of or jumping on board with creating the skills around data analytics that you might need to do this. And you're potentially a little bit further behind in terms of the influence within the organization. And so here in Australia and New Zealand, you're measured in terms of customer acquisition, not revenue. It's about customer acquisition. You look at the rest of the world here, big number, 27% are talking about revenue impact as the way they measure in terms of customer acquisition. Sorry, the way they're primarily measured within their organization, that it's in terms of revenue impact. So it is about revenue. Top bar there, the red one, it's about customer acquisition in Australia and New Zealand, 26%. So more of the traditional focus of marketing, it is focused on customer acquisition here. Understandably, that is also regarded as your biggest challenge. Customer acquisition is the biggest challenge as well. That's how you're measured. That is your biggest challenge. And that is where you're focusing your investment as well. So 41% are saying customer acquisition is where most of is the top area of investment for you now, so in the next 12 months. It is closely followed by this shift to digital marketing engagement, but customer acquisition still seems to be the predominant story for marketers in Australia and New Zealand. But you do expect to make more use of data to gain insight. So there is an awareness. You guys are telling us that there is an awareness of the power of data, the power of information. So, and you do expect to use that more into the future, potentially not putting enough effort into retooling and the skills required to get the most value out of that, but you do see that will be more value from data analytics in the future. That's happening now and into the future. And as a result, you are investing in getting more information. Your top areas of investment, which is in line, pretty much in line with the rest of the world, is around managing these data, is managing things like social media and analytics to get more value from that data. Things like social marketing, marketing analytics, email marketing, mobile marketing, all of these digital channels you are investing heavily in, which is good to see. So that was what was happening now, and then in the next 3 to 5 years. What's happening in the future? And so this is an interesting slide because the research showed that really there's quite a big difference between what Australia and New Zealand think is going to be the biggest influencer moving forward and what the rest of the world thinks is going to be the biggest influence going forward. And so Australia and New Zealand, we're talking about real-time mobile personalized transactions. 65%, big number, are saying that this will have the biggest impact on marketers in the future. The rest of the world, however, are saying Internet of Things. And they're saying that quite positively, that the Internet of Things is going to be the big technology trend to drive forward. Now, I personally would tend to agree that the IoT is going to have more of a fundamental impact on marketing and really on many different functions within a company. Because the IoT is the thing, and if the whole premise of this is that the power of marketing, the power of marketers is going to come from your ability to understand the whole customer experience and to utilize data and information to create value and help plan long-term strategy for your business. If that's the premise, then the IoT is the thing that is going to give you all of that information to make better decisions, better understand the customer, better understand how products and services are being used and consumed. IoT is going to generate this exponential amount of data. There are some big numbers out there from people like Cisco, which are talking about, 50 billion devices are going to be connected in the next 10 years. It's difficult to know. It's difficult to plan for this. But I personally think that IoT is really is really going to be the main driver going forward. And I would suggest potentially one of the reasons why IoT, Internet of Things, didn't hit the #1 spot here in Australia is that there is a pretty low level of awareness around IoT, particularly here. I did a research project a little bit earlier this year. I did it for Telstra, who were looking at the adoption of M2M or IoT in Australia. And something interesting came up when we started doing this research, is that we started talking to interviewees about machine-to-machine communications or IoT. They're a little bit different, but all feed into the same thing. And a lot of people didn't know what we're talking about. There's a low level of recognition about what those terms mean, and therefore there's a very low recognition of the value that they can bring to their companies. So I think as that changes, as it develops, as awareness increases in the future, I'd like to come back here a couple of years' time. I reckon we could do this research again, and I think that number would change. I think you'd probably switch to IoT, because I think that is really where the massive value is going to come. But what I do know is that the future is going to be really interesting for you guys. It's so much opportunity out there. You have so much potential to influence the long-term strategy of your organizations. If you're able to retool, if you're able to utilize all of the data available to you, if you're able to increase your influence within the organization, it's a really exciting time to be a marketer. But you're going to have to fight a little bit to grab onto that ground, because the CFO might be wanting to jump on with the analytics, or the CEO might be pushing his influence down on taking control of the customer experience, because saying that we're the only person with the influence to be able to do this. But I would disagree. I think you guys have a real opportunity to jump on board with that. Now, there's some more information about this in the research. I see some of you have it on your laps here. I encourage you to read it, refer to it. Hope it helps, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for your time.